And g'day, friends, fans, and other cool units. I'm David Applegate, author of the book The Boyhood of Cade, one of the Empire of the Elves. And welcome to Future Fantasy Empire. Today with me is John Taylor, author of I Will Find You. John, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Oh, hello, David, and hello, everybody who may be listening. What can I say? I was raised in an English village at the end of World War II. Trained as an engineer, didn't much like that. I couldn't earn enough. Took up a commercial career, which took me to living in 7 different countries. One of them took me through Australia. And I thought, well, Australia, this is okay. So I decided to stay. And really, here I am in Perth.
Right. Yes. Western Australia is one of many destinations, although most tend to favour Melbourne. Now,
I've lived in Melbourne, and it's a matter of personal taste, I think.
If 4 seasons in one day reminds a lot of people of London. 4 seasons in one day, as the song goes, and it reminds people of London.
I didn't find, strangely enough, people who visit Melbourne say, "Oh, what a great, vibrant place it is," but it's a bit different when you try to live there.
Yes.
It's well, let's say it wasn't conducive to my best mental welfare. I used to get very frustrated with the things that went on there. It's Australia's smallest state, and I decided that they had a complex about it.
Yeah, little man syndrome.
You got it. You got it. Yeah, and the other thing is that Melbourne itself doesn't have a great deal to offer, except that what they buy in a huge amount. They have this mentality that they've got to have it, whether they need it or want it. They've got to have the biggest, the tallest, the longest, the shortest, the deepest, the highest, the most expensive. The only one in Australia seems to dominate. And that goes right from people on the street to the, well, at the time when I was living there, the Premier of the state. Now, having said that, before people in Melbourne start getting upset with me, that's not everybody, but that's what I came away with from, shall we say, certain quarters of the town.
I'm pretty sure half of Melbourne's nodding and pointing to the other half and noticing they're doing the same. When did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
David, I'm not sure that I did realize. It sort of crept up on me. My writing started when I was gainfully employed. I needed to do training exercises with groups of people, and I couldn't find ready-made programs, so I started to write them myself, and that's where I started. I then went on and did 1 or 2 training manuals, and whilst I was in Melbourne, I did a weekly column for 2 years in one of the newspapers there, only a short column. And that sort of really got me into it. And I was rather tickled pink to see my name in the newspaper.
Well, it certainly wasn't the money.
Well, you can say that again. But how I got into writing novels was that I came across a set of circumstances, and it was a story that I and many other people have since said, the story needed to be told, and that got me into writing this one, I Will Find You. And I did quite a lot of research over several years in order to put it together. But I was motivated by the fact that the people I'd come across in researching wanted their story told, and previously no one would believe them. And I thought, damn it, I'll do it. And that's really how I got into it. But the first book I ever wrote was really to learn how to use a computer, how to use Word. And I wrote a book of verse about growing up in an English village. It's called Raising Fen Tigers. I won't go into what a fen tiger is at the moment, but it's a book of verses about growing up in an English village. Some very touching, some quite amusing, things like that. But I did it because with verse, there's a lot of formatting, and you have to think about what you're doing. And that was how I learned to use Word. The truth is that I wrote quite a lot of these verses. I was enjoying doing it. And my wife said, look, you should send it to a publisher because people might want to read that. And my reaction was, nobody's going to want to read that. However, it went to a publisher. The publisher said, yes, we'd love to proceed with it. And there we are. We got Raising Fen Tigers. And that was my first book.
Most publishers these days want agents to be doing the submitting.
Yeah.
Unless it's vanity publishing, and then they're sending you a bill, no matter how good or bad your book is, unfortunately.
Yeah. And you need a mortgage to pay the bill.
Yeah. And the thing is, there aren't bad books. There's just a story for everybody. Unfortunately, today's audience seems to be in love with reviews and recommendations. Publishers and studios just want a sure hit, I guess.
One of the things I've found about the industry is, apart from the fact that I think it needs a good shake-up, is that to get to anyone in matter is extremely hard. They surround themselves with armor-plated glass. They want you to know about them, but you can't contact them. And this one, I Will Find You, is going to become a film. Now, that came about through someone who knew somebody else in the industry. Interestingly enough, a lot of people who have read the book and done reviews said it would make a great film. And I had sent it to a number of places, agents or producers. You just don't get a reply, or they'll say, we don't accept unsolicited manuscripts, which is rather interesting because you wonder how the hell they get their stories. But
like I said, they have it on their website, how to make a submission.
Yes,
that's what I say to them. How did this get through? I sent it to you.
Yeah.
Well, but tell me more about your writing process. Do you have a process? What's your?
I don't have a structured process at all, to be honest with you. I do it when I can. I do research. I try to do that very accurately because, if I'm writing about things that actually happened, then, I want it to be accurate, because if it's not, for example, this is my latest book, and there's a lot of historical stuff in it. It's not a history book, but there's a lot of historical stuff in it. And if a historian was to read it, say, well, that's not right. That didn't happen in that year, and not to that person. The story loses credibility. So I take a great deal of focus, if you like, on making sure everything is correct. But
do you have a particular method to your research? I mean, most people these days, I know it's search engines, but some people, you strike me as the guy who goes that extra mile.
Well, I will go and when I say interview, I don't interview people. I go and sit and talk with them. And I will travel a bit to do that. I do research on the net. I do research in the library. I get contacts. For example, in that book, I Will Find You, I made contact with an Aboriginal gentleman who was from the tribe that I wrote about, the Madu people from up in the desert country in Western Australia. And he was able to give me Aboriginal names, places, and quite a bit of information in order to keep it authentic. But the other thing, as I mentioned, Aboriginal, in Australia, one has to be very, very careful about what one says about Aboriginal people. So it needed to be absolutely accurate.
Are laws, yes, there are laws that we must. abide, whether we agree with free speech or not. Those are the agreements we have.
But
and I'm not going to go too much into it, but when I was doing my own research, I actually found out that they actually took in a lot of wrecked seamen over the last 400 years. I was surprised how many ships sunk off the Western Australian coast, actually.
Yeah.
Did you ever come across those stories?
I have come across one, but I've been too busy doing other things to read too much about that.
Yeah.
Fremantle, which is just down the road from me, they have a very, very good shipwreck museum. And
Yes.
a couple of hours wandering through there, and you suddenly realize how treacherous the coast was. Yet you tend not to realize, because when you go to the coast and you drive up and down, it's just it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful beaches.
You see amazing photos of ships, and you hear stories of stormy seas, and you go, I haven't spent a lot of time, but you got the Fremantle Yacht Club, and they go out daily.
Yes.
And they always come back.
Yes.
There just must have been that period just before settlement where the oceans were really, really turbulent.
I think part of it is these days, these ocean conditions are forecast, whereas then they weren't.
Yeah, and they probably sailed
they go out and get stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, probably sailed into a few treacherous reefs off Shark Island off the coast too.
Yeah,
I heard they got a few.
There's one area southwest of Perth where there's a shallow, and when there's a storm, the waves get up to 50 and 60 feet high there. And some very brave surfers will take themselves out there to surf. And when you see them, they look like a gnat on a camel's back surfing down these waves.
Yes, take yourself out is quite an interesting term, considering some of them every year are taken out, quite literally.
Yes.
It's
well,
something
the waves
I would not recommend.
Sharks will.
Yes. Do you have a favorite writer or a particular book?
Well, I tell you, a person who inspired me most was Bryce Courtney. And I read his first one, The Power of One. And because I'd lived in South Africa for several years and in the same area that the book is written, it resonated with me because I understood a lot of the mentality. I knew the geography, but it's just a beautifully written book, lovely yarn. And that's really what started me off. And I thought if I could emulate in my writing the same style as Bryce Courtney, I couldn't go too far wrong. So in a way, the poor man is no longer with us, but I guess he was my mentor when it comes to writing stories.
Well, in my other videos, I often recommend to people to find the best book in your genre, and that's the best way to learn your genre.
Yes, yeah. One of the things I liked about Bryce Courtney is that he was never too clever. And by that, let's put it this way. I get frustrated if I'm reading a book and I keep coming across words I've never heard of before. And I have to put the book down and go to a dictionary. And that I find aggravating. And it's really, in my opinion, I'm sorry, other authors, if you do that, it is frustrating. And, there's a certain element that says, are you showing off?
Unfortunately, these days, it's not so much showing off, it's the autocorrects. They're often now recommending words to people, and they'll just click, okay, and it says, you've improved the tone of your book. And it's also the editors.
Yeah.
Show some intellect. So, it's...
But I
remember, unfortunately, these days you're not pleasing the audience; you're pleasing the publisher.
Yes, and depending on the publisher, they may even want to change your story.
Yes, that's unfortunate.
I had that experience with the screenwriter for "I Will Find You," some of the things he wanted to change in the story, I'm completely out of
Can't
the
change
blue.
somebody else's story, man. That's their experience.
Well, well, let's say we ended up not going with that screenwriter because of it.
Yes.
I mean, the story is just to give you an outline of the story, because it is based on real life events. The story actually starts in an English village in 1944, so the war years. The little boy is 4 years old. He, through circumstances of war, becomes separated from his mother, and he goes to an orphanage where he stays until he's 7. And his mother, in the meantime, has tried to get him back, but without going into a lot of detail, she can't get him back because of bureaucracy. She didn't comply to one rule, and so she basically, her boy was made a ward of the state. At the age of 7, he was scooped up in the child migration system. Now, this is really where I got tuned into this, because not a lot of people know about child migration, yet up to 130,000 children were shipped out of British and Maltese and Irish orphanages to British Commonwealth countries to help populate them. Many of them, as in our main character's situation, his name was changed because he was going to a family in Australia of that name. However, he never did go there. None of them did. They were not adopted into a family at all.
No, I don't know every story, but I do know recently there were a few who found out they were given fake birth certificates, fake names, fake death certificates for parents who didn't exist.
Correct.
And of course, they went to blame Churchill and his government, but it actually occurred between 47 and 53. It actually occurred after Churchill and before his second term.
But it was still going on up to
it was still going on up to the 80s.
1965.
65. No, there were migrations out of Ireland up until the 80s, where where the Irish government was because they were trying to empty the orphanages because their economy kept. They couldn't afford it.
Well, the main character here finds himself in a place in Perth, which was known as Clontarf Boys Town, and it was
terrible.
Probably the most notoriously cruel place you could put any child. And I won't go into the detail, but he stays there until he's 11. The story is not about that. It's not all doom and gloom about cruelty and things like that. But it has to be there to know why the rest of the story is there. At the age of 11, he runs away and he meets an Aboriginal boy of a similar age who is about to trek hundreds and hundreds of miles across the Australian outback up to the desert country. He's returning to his family into a settlement. And so Nick, that's his new name, tags along with him. And the story unfolds, and he lives with the Aboriginals in the outback until he's 15 years old. At the age of 15, his circumstances change, and he decides that he really wants to go and try and find his mother. And he sets out on this epic journey to do that. I'm not going to tell you anymore because it'll spoil the story. But even with what I've said, there's an awful lot more to it than what I've just roughly outlined. But the point about it is that the people that went through these institutions, the children, they were not treated well, and that's a gross understatement. But the problem, and one of the hang-ups, perhaps wrong as a hang-up is the wrong word, one of their biggest frustrations is that no one would ever believe them. A child would run away, go to the police and say, look, I've run away because this has been happening. They wouldn't believe them. They just take the child back. So
I do not understand the mentality that occurred, but apparently it's called establishmentarianism. That is, you have a set of established rules and circumstances in your life, and you believe this applies to everybody. If you've been at the receiving end of benevolence of the government, you're not going to believe the opposite.
Yeah.
Particularly in adversarial political systems like the one we have, way more adversarial back then than most people understand. Politics was very vitriol. It has always been vitriol. I mean, England's had wars over elections and election results.
Well, a bit like the USA now.
Yeah, well, USA is USA. Wait until you have Sussex and the army of Sussex marching on Parliament, demanding a recount. Then you'll not understand how. Americans don't understand, I don't think.
No, but what I will say is that I feel privileged to be living in Australia because it's a different environment altogether. Look, nowhere's perfect. We have our problems, but not the way the rest of the world, shall we say, is behaving. And I'm very pleased to be here.
And regardless of how people feel, I think all Australians are just trying to find a way to iron out a few more kinks that we have in the system right now. It's just, unfortunately, some people want to put their thumbs on a scale. You know what I mean?
Yes, but one of the things that happens is that the bureaucracy gets carried away with itself.
Yes,
and
believing they know better.
An expression, and that is that it really describes, bureaucracy, and it is that it's a camel, and a camel is a racehorse designed by a committee.
Yeah.
And the more you think about it, the more you realize it. I mean, I have a small income from the UK, just give you an idea. And I've just received a form to complete for the tax department. And there are 13 pages. It comes with a 40-page book on how to fill it in. Now, would you think that someone would say, God, if we got to produce this 40-page booklet to tell people how to fill it in, shouldn't we perhaps look at some of the questions again?
There's
a camel. That's a camel.
That's a camel. Yep. I've been through this with funding of the arts to fund a single artist, just to even try to get any type of grant or award or anything. It's just all bureaucracy. It's who you know.
Absolutely.
So unless there's somebody out there pushing for you, they're just going to take you with a grain of salt and pass you over very quickly.
The other thing you notice that when you get mixed up in this bureaucracy, no one wants to take responsibility and no one dares to use their initiative.
No. The nail that stands out gets hammered down in the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Now, where else did you draw inspiration in? Creating, I suppose, your process of writing. I Will Find You.
Okay, from I Will Find You or the other one? The inspiration for I Will Find You actually started when I read a book by the most wonderful lady named Margaret Humphreys. And she wrote a book called Empty Cradles, and it was an account of how she uncovered the whole tragedy of child migration. And that sensitized me to the plight of orphans, basically, and people in care, children in care. And I was fishing one day, and I met a gentleman, and we just got chatting, and lo and behold, he had been a child migrant. And things he was telling me resonated with me because I'd done a bit of research by then. And that's when I decided this story has to be told. So that's where the inspiration for that one came from. The other one is Lost in Time just came from a bit of soul searching, I suppose. And I'll go as far as to say it was inspired by my grandfather. He he was a horseman. He worked Clydesdales and Shire horses on the farms, well, right up until the 1940s. And when he was ploughing one day, a vessel rolled off his plough, which he took away and cleaned up, some sort of a pot, a strange looking thing it was. And it's now actually in the British Museum, and they still, as yet, have not identified what it's used for. Well, that inspired me because in this story, something similar happens, except that it has a substance in it with unusual properties. And the pot is dated back to the early 12th century, about the time of King John and the Knights Templar. So there's a bit of time slip between the early 19th century and the early 12th century. But it's actually quite an adventure, and it's suspense right until the last page. And it involves children. I'll go as far as to say that children from the village start to go missing and they can't be found. And I ought not really say any more in case anyone reads it. I don't want to spoil the story for them.
Definitely, please. What advice would you give to a new writer?
I would say write what you know about, but keep it simple. Don't get too sophisticated. Remember, I would say make each page count and don't have too much fat in it. That's about it, I guess, would be the thing. Keep it logical, and depending on the genre, I suppose I was going to say make it believable, but just don't get too sophisticated and too clever. And
depending on the genre, you can make anything believable, but that's the problem, isn't it? It's whether or not they believe you. You can believe it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I don't include in my books is sex. I only write what I know about.
I'm the opposite. I believe I believe too many people out there are too infantile and can't handle the fact that adults will be adults.
Yes. No, that's I've in my stories, I've never felt the need to include anything sex. I think the closest
it's not for everybody, but
no. But the closest I ever got, it was in Lost in Time when I said that. I think the line is, and things improved in the bedroom.
Well, there you go.
And that's as close as I get.
Now, some people find writing stressful. Some do not. Do you encounter stress, and how do you deal with it?
No, I don't get stressed by it, but I can get frustrated in the research if I can't find what I'm looking for. But stress, no. How do I, if I do get frustrated, and I'll give myself a break. And it's quite interesting if when you're writing, you reach a point where things just aren't going right, just leave it for 2 or 3 weeks and then go back to it. And for some reason, it all seems to drop into place. But it does for me anyway. I think it's possible you can get too saturated with what you're trying to say.
Fair enough. I can understand that. Personally, I think writer's block is you've written ahead and you just got to wait for your characters to catch up.
Yes. Yeah. Well, if I in those times, one of the best ways I have of clearing my head is I go fishing.
Yeah, it's lovely. I was going to ask.
I'll go fishing and I'll stand there for several hours with a rod in my hand and my wife says, bless her heart, she says, "What do you think about all that time?" And I said, "I've no idea." I can't tell her what I was thinking about. I was thinking about fishing, and that was it. But it clears the mind, helps you relax. That's it, I guess. Fishing, I do quite a bit of DIY. I quite like to do things with my hands. So fishing, DIY. And I'm lucky in that I do have a very understanding wife who we share a lot of time together, and we do we walk a lot. And
yes,
that's our therapy.
For me, I write a lot. I do YouTube videos. I'm on a couple of other channels. I've got this. I have another. I do coffee and gaming with the men's room. I do a few things, but a lot of it is centered around writing. I do articles for Role Playing Game.
Okay.
And I'm doing a video series on my locals community on world building. If you're into science fiction and fantasy, you spend a lot of time doing world building, but everybody has world building. And I just did a video yesterday on emotions in writing, which was somewhat well received, but like to see people actually give thumbs up to the videos, not thumbs up to me in private chat. I don't know what it is with getting people to give a like to a video these days.
Okay.
But I find in various circumstances, I think a lot of people will get a lot out of your book, particularly with empathy, sympathy, and an understanding of the plight of the society's forgotten, the downtrodden. Definitely, I mean, since Chaucer, Dickens, they've always recognised that the first victims of society are the easily forgotten.
Yes,
the orphans, the widows.
Yeah, but you mentioned emotion, and this one, I will find you, has been described as an emotional roller coaster. Look, I'm the author, I shouldn't say it, but it's supercharged with emotion. And in fact, there's one page that I won't say which it is, which even when I read it, I get a lump in my throat. And I wrote it, and I must have read it 20 times. I still get a lump in my throat.
Well, other than Amazon, where else can we find your writing?
Well, at the moment, only on Amazon.
Right.
Unless you're local, and I do stand-up talks and presentations about all three books, actually. In fact, I've got 2 later this month. But Amazon is where you'll find them. And I went with Amazon because it's easily worldwide.
It's the easiest to publish with.
And
it's far easier than vanity publishers. Trust me, folks. You just
it's a lot
better off
less
doing
expensive
it
too.
It's
a lot less expensive.
You're better off doing it yourself.
Yeah.
You could go to Fiverr, get a cover. You could if you're having trouble. There are many Facebooks and other groups where you can go and actually get help with writing your blurb. You write the book, and then authors, when it comes to the blurb, it's like, oh.
Yeah. Well, the first version of I Will Find You sold very well, but it was due to my own promotional activities, not the publishers. And I won't say who the publisher is because it probably wouldn't be fair, but one of the things I noticed, I'll explain how it happened. At the time I was finishing writing that book, my son was in his final months of a terminal illness, and I really couldn't focus on it. So I sent it to a publisher, and they said, look, don't worry about editing it. We'll edit it, and we'll do it all for you. Well, they didn't. They just published it exactly as I sent it. And when I heard it was going to become a film, I was asked if I would like to do the screenplay after a couple of failed attempts with professional screenwriters. So I said, yes, I'd do it. And I thought I'd better read the book again just to refresh my memory on everything. So I keep everything logical and as it should be. And then I kept spotting the errors. So I immediately had it taken off the market. And the book you buy today is, in fact, the second edition with all the corrections done.
Believe it or not, I've been through 3 editors, including 2 professionals. And I'm really questioning, but the problem is the English language. There are things like commas and there's this new drift towards concise language instead of, to cut out the meat, I suppose, the verbs, the adverbs, etc., to cut the action down, cut the adjectives. So,
well, when I was redoing the book, I did get some wonderful help from 2 or 3 other authors, and I learned things I didn't even know about before. I mean,
we're always learning.
I'd never heard of an Oxford comma.
Yes, I have, and
I hadn't.
Oh, and Microsoft editors tend to get rid of the Oxford comma, whereas some people, I won't say what they are because YouTube freaks out when I say it, but there are some people who make the 1930s little mustache man look rather sane when it comes to the Oxford comma. They really get fanatical about it, I tell you.
Yes. But there we go. So, as I said, the book that's available now is the second corrected edition.
Do you have any idea when this film is being produced or coming out?
Well, I've written the screenplay.
Yeah.
We, with the producer, have already approached certain funding sources, and at the moment we're waiting for replies to come back.
So that's a pre-production is between 1 and 2 years, so it could be up to 5 years.
Yeah, well, we're 18 months in now, so but there's still a lot to do, but it is underway.
Yeah, I had brief. I went to QUT, and briefly I had experience there with people trying to put together a raw student film, and boy, the process they go through to just get a student film done. I mean, and it's their job. That's what they have to do. That's basically what the film school does.
Yes, yeah. But we also need to find a distributor because
yes,
the distributor
can't make a film without a distributor. Can't make a film without legal copyright. Can't make a film without government classification.
It's a camel, David.
It is. It is a camel. Perfect ending in it. It's all a camel. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for listening. If you like the video, please give us a like. If you like to help John out, share the video. Help spread the message of a wonderful book. Thank you all for coming. Final words, John.
Well, if you're watching in and you're going to watch in, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it. I'm flattered that other people would be interested in anything I have to say and read. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.